Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Hey
Just
everyone.
assuming everyone is saying hi back to us,
Yeah.
screaming our praises, or just screaming, perhaps.
Some good usernames in this list.
Pick your favorite.
Clean towels. You can never have too many, can you? You always need some clean towels.
the the reasoning for naming yourself something is my favorite. Like, why would you pick that? I want to know the story. It's usually just like what is nearby when I'm creating a username.
Yeah. It's like the Mrs. Doubtfire effect.
Or maybe they have a friend who's dirty towels.
Mm, that's the OnlyFans account.
Oh god.
Cool. Well, it's 101. Should we open up that question thread?
Yeah, so welcome everybody to the audio AMA. Keep in mind that this means the devs in this session today are obviously the audio team. So your questions should be on topic, otherwise, we won't be able to answer. Ian and I will be picking out some of the questions from the list randomly, and then the devs will be answering. So we have Luke, who is a sound designer, Matt, who's a senior sound designer, and Ben, who is the audio director. And those are the three that will be answering your questions.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
How to do?
I'll go ahead and open the channel now. There you go.
Cool.
Okay.
Kicking it off. Error 404. File not found. What decided criteria to decide to go for a more or less realistic sound design for sounds in space?
Yeah, super good question. Um, it was probably born out of the overall aesthetic of the game. Like the game is it's not hard sci-fi, but it's trending in that direction. There's fairly in-depth models of things like pressurization. So because we knew from the beginning that we were going to have areas of the game that could be pressurized and areas of the game that would be unpressurized, well, we kind of like we always wanted to bring that out. Like we wanted to make it feel like when you were in a vacuum, you were in a vacuum, and it sounded like you were in a vacuum. And then when you were in the ship and you could hear acoustic sounds, we wanted it to feel like you were hearing airborne sounds. So yeah, it was just it was a natural outcome from that setup, from the kind of the overall aesthetic and the fact that you had pretty in-depth simulations of pressurization in that way. Like the more we thought about it, there wasn't really another way that we thought we could approach it and be able to bring that kind of stuff out. I don't know if Luke or Matt have other stuff to add to that.
Nothing for me. I think you kind of nailed it.
There's a lot of really cool questions already.
Sweet.
So the second one right after is from Tiamat of the Sea. First of all, hi Luke. Thank you so much for the quick response on the transport ship sounds. Not only does the ship no longer cause issues, it's still got plenty of impact and sounds great generally. In general, for the team as a whole, are there any real world noises that you've heard which you'd especially like to find a use for in the game?
Well, maybe I can kick this off, and then Ben and Matt, if you have anything that jumps out at you, that like things that you've been trying to use in game. That's a really good question. There are certain things that we'll hear, and it'll just be so obscure or really weird, and we'll try to find a spot for them, either in this game or something else we do. But I think one of the top ones is a bit silly. Is like a friend of mine recently had a kid and found out that the kind of mechanic sound of the like, well, no other word for it, but like the breast pump sound is really weird and unique, and it's got this kind of like wow wow wow, and I've been trying to been trying to get that in some game for a while. Probably not just like directly in, but that, and then construction for sure. We, especially from work from home, are constantly hearing stuff on the street, and occasionally I'll run outside and record people working on the road nearby, and that's something that's always pretty interesting. What about you
That
guys?
was that was awesome. I feel like each audio dev at the end of the session should do a sound effect that's their favorite.
Nice. I know I've a little while ago I got an automaton, and I really want to get that in the game somehow.
Yeah, as I've been working on a lot of the tools in the game, and because of the themes of our game and industry and all that, I've been going to real world tools and mechanics and industrial tools, and then we try to get recordings of them through a contact mic to get that sense of vibration of the tool, which you'd hear through your suit. And then the other one is EMI or RF recordings of like radio frequency interference given off by electronics. We got a new mic at the studio that we've been using and recording stuff around our neighborhoods and things, and we're trying to put as much of that into the game as possible as well.
Yeah, just to quickly follow up on that, game's kind of similar to like Fallout in the sense that nothing quite works very well. Everything is a bit janky and old school, so it's a big focus for us to hit the aesthetic of things being a bit broken or like low budget and lo-fi. So anytime we find something that is like a machine that's broken or breaking down, it's always a big win for us.
Danikov asks, are the radio snippets when you damage your helmet limited to short snippets for copyright reasons, or could we get more randomized parts of the piece?
Yeah, they are not licensed tracks. They're composed for the game. So we built those from scratch with the composers that we work with. Um, they are not full length tracks because obviously we have a budget, and the longer the piece of music is, the more money you pay for it. So we have I think it's 4 or 5 different tracks for the radio helmet damage. And right now, for each track, I want to say there's maybe a minute of it. And I think currently in game, we use about 40 seconds of each of the minutes, split into two 20-second chunks. So we could cut more random bits out of the minute of each track that we have, if you know what I mean. Um, but no, there's no copyright reasons. Yeah, we own that music. It's part of the game's soundtrack. And for sure, we could definitely sort of like cut more into those pieces and get more use out of what we've got. But I mean, it's going to feel fairly similar to what we got, but maybe there's a bit more we can do to expose that stuff. So yeah, thanks for the idea there.
Very important follow-up question. This one's from Cyrilia. Space shanties. Thoughts?
Love it.
I think of nothing else.
How about you, Matt? Thoughts on space shanties?
Yeah, I love shanties. I've been following the TikTok craze, and I am all for adding that if we can get that.
I don't know. It kind of makes it seem like everyone's really happy, and no one's happy in Link space.
They can be shanties of unionization, I suppose.
We don't use that word.
Yeah, I was gonna say don't use that word.
Yep, that's Matt fired.
How did you, also from Cyrilia, how did you come up with the grapple sound?
Uh, hmm, where did it all start? uh, the beam came from those EMF recordings I was talking about, just trying to make the sound of energy, and but keeping it feel real world and dynamic when it's being labored by having to pull something really heavy or push something around. Um, the push is made up with different synth layers, trying to give it that kind of a growl to it when it kind of pushes things and give it a sense of you're pushing something really heavy. Um, yeah, it was took a lot of iteration. It was a long process to make that, and I'm pretty happy with where it kind of landed.
It's worth saying as well. It's so it's alive. You feel like as you're putting that thing under load and as you're attaching it and releasing it, it's reacting to what you're doing with it as a player. And like I know, like I've been working with Matt for quite a while. I know like he's super inspired by like providing that kind of level of immersion and feedback to players as they're using these tools. So that was definitely like right at the forefront of what we were aiming for with that, was like to make it feel incredibly like tactile and alive and responsive. Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, we've got a lot of game parameters that are based on the player's actions that directly control aspects of the audio, from pitch to volume to filtering to various effects on like a flanger, for example.
Yeah.
We've got two questions from, well, one question from two individuals. Walurdes asks, what are your inspirations for that banger OST? And then Eddie's Kingdom also adds, I got a hint of Kevin MacLeod and Simon Sir. Sorry, I can't pronounce if I'm right.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And I see there's also one from Guy there about the you know, folk music influences and all that kind of stuff. They're all kind of hinting at the same sort of questions, like who were the who were the influences behind the soundtrack and what inspired it. Um, yeah, I mean, right back when I first came into the early stages of the game, the soundtrack was kind of cobbled together. It was a mishmash of different things, and I was brought in to kind of like give the game a kind of fairly holistic audio direction to kind of unify the audio and give it a vibe. And one of the most important things when you're trying to do that is to nail a music style. So I sat down with the designers, and we thrashed out a bunch of potential influences, and then we just distilled it down, distilled it down, distilled it down. And we started out, we cast a kind of really wide net initially, and we had everything from kind of like more rocky stuff, more country stuff, more bluesy stuff, and we gradually just kind of excluded stuff that wasn't quite right. And we ended up with a really small set of tracks and artists that we felt really got to the spirit of the game. And it was, you know, very much informed by that kind of blue collar, hard, dirty work aesthetic. And yeah, like I mean, some of the artists that are mentioned in the questions here, I actually don't. I'm not familiar with them specifically, but I'm sure they're all part of that same genre that we're drawing from um, for references. Just stuff like anything that's like American folk, Americana, dark country, all that kind of stuff feeds into our style. Um, Certainly, like some artists we were checking out at the time were people like William Elliott Whitmore, um, Gillian Welch rather, um, all the way through to people like Johnny Cash, who's obviously a lot better known. And we just kind of mashed all that stuff up and sent that off to our composers and just said, we told them nothing about the game. We told them absolutely, didn't even tell them it was a sci-fi game, and just sent them a whole bunch of reference and just sort of said, make music that kind of hits this emotional tone. And they absolutely killed it. We're working with primarily with two composers. We're working with a composer called John O'Grant, who is based in Toronto, and then another guy called Traz Damji, who's based here in BC on the West Coast. So yeah, those guys were just absolutely fantastic to work with, and they understood the aesthetic we were going for. And yeah, it's turned out pretty good.
A very important follow-up question from Guy. Will we see a re-released OST with the new tracks in the near future?
Yes.
And if by the near future you mean the near past.
Today.
So just for everyone's information, the soundtrack was updated this morning. There are 4 new tracks on it, so if you haven't checked it out already, check it out. There's also a new video on YouTube. Tina, can you tell us the details about the video?
Yeah, it's like a lo-fi, you know those popular music videos lately where it's called lo-fi beats or lo-fi beats to chill to kind of thing, and then you've got the character sitting in a chair studying. Well, we've created our version of that with our soundtrack.
If you check out the announcements channel in Discord, there is a link to it.
Mhm.
Focus. Let's see. Can we get a sneak peek of the next sound effect that's going to be added to the game? Can anyone do an imitation of an upcoming sound effect?
Try to think.
So I'm hearing an explosion followed by a coffee machine turning on.
That's awesome.
I see there's one from Guy there. What were the difficulties with the AI node sounds? That might be something that Matt can talk about.
Yes, yes, like 2 parts about the AI nodes and then how we make it affect the music and sound in the game. I think Luke
Yeah.
worked on how it transitioned there based on proximity. Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we did get some feedback about some confusion around this, but basically, when you do get closer to AI nodes and therefore the ghost ship, we have your radio and comms being negatively affected by the interference from the AI nodes. So your music will cut out and your radio will be distorted, and then upon destroying AI nodes, that will come back. And that took a lot of work to kind of tweak the transition between the two because it's all based on the distance, how far away you are between an AI node and the player.
that? I guess I can talk a little bit about how they were created. We wanted to give them kind of a vocal quality to make them seem like they were a machine that was alive to some degree. So I was experimenting with what's called a Eurorack synthesizer and trying to recreate kind of a synthesized voice. Uh, and you can do that with common ways through wavetable synthesis, but I chose to go a more old school way because of our game's kind of uh, more simplistic, kind of early tech of the future kind of vibe instead of futuristic sci-fi, um, and used like audio filter modulated at audio rate instead of an LFO or something like that, and it gives a that kind of same kind of weird vocal quality to it.
Awesome. Danikov asks, what's the story behind the evolution of the sparse track variants?
Oh yeah. Sparse. I guess someone's been busting out the game files. So yeah, the sparse tracks are just less dense versions of the music, the music at large. Like, so when the composers deliver tracks to us, they deliver what's called stems, and stems are remixable versions of the track. So they might have the drums on one track, acoustic guitar one on the next track, acoustic guitar two on the next one, and then all the different elements are there. And if I want to remix it, I can. Um, so what we decided with the sparse tracks was that the first uh, few minutes of the game should have sparser music, and the longer you spend in your shift, the more dense and the more high tempo and the more intense the music becomes. And I'm not talking about the synth elements here, I'm just talking about the folk. So the first track that gets selected when you enter a level is very likely going to be, it's all kind of chance based. It's all kind of like, there's a degree of randomization at play, but it's very likely that the first track you hear is one of these sparse track variants. And the idea is to set the scene in a very kind of slow and deliberate way, without overloading you with a lot of like dense music at the start. We kind of just bring you in slowly and with these kind of with lots of room for you to kind of take in the kind of view of the ship, hear some of your breathing coming through the sound of the tools for the first few times you use them. And then as you spend more time in the shift, the music builds. So the first track might be sparse, the second track is going to be less sparse, it's going to be more dense. And the longer you've been in there, the more likely you are to hear things like electric guitars, and more kind of fleshed out drum parts. So as you go through the shift, as you spend longer in the shift, the music will gain energy and density. So that's kind of what we were going at with the sparse tracks. So that's just a way to get you into the shift without overloading you at first. Yeah.
Awesome. So book asks, well, first of all, did any of you read the Polygon essay on SF banjos, which I assume means sci-fi banjos, not San Francisco banjos?
Yeah, I saw that. It was really cool.
Mhm.
So did you like it?
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah. The dirty secret though is that there's only banjo in our game in the intro movie. After the intro movie, there is never banjo again in the whole soundtrack. That's the dirty secret.
Awesome.
It's not really that dirty, is it?
Depends on how dirty the banjos are.
True.
There's an interesting question from Clean Towels. Has the sound design usage of how you implement audio within the game has changed? Within the game changed much since the game has been in development? I'll reread that. Has the sound design or usage of how you implement audio within the game changed much since the game has been in development? Do you have any particular long-term goals for audio within the game?
That's a really good question.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll give you where my head's been, and then you guys chime in as well. Um, the big move for me has been orienting to deliver more final speech. Like, you probably remember when we launched in early access, a lot of the speech was text to speech, which is kind of robo voice. We've been adding, proper professional acting, and that soaks up an awful lot of time and effort. So yeah, that's kind of where my head has been more into kind of VO. And also we've gone from having 8 folk tracks that we shipped with to having 12, so like 50% more music, and there's going to be more as well. So yeah, my head's kind of been in just adding content, adding VO, adding music. But I don't think, I mean, you guys, Matt and Luke, like, let me know what you think. But we haven't really changed like any of the major approaches, right? We've pretty much just doubled down on our approaches in terms of implementation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, obviously Ben's been on this project the longest, so he set up a lot of the audio systems and has the most knowledge about it. But when Matt and I joined, obviously we picked up from that and then added our own kind of spin on certain elements. And then everything new that's come in has really just been like, okay, well, what did we do previously? What worked well? What didn't? So it's a lot of like learning from previous, I don't know, elements that go into the game or sounds or ways of injecting immersion into the game, which is kind of like a big one. Is like, long-term goals at least is making the game the most immersive it could be for sure. I don't know, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, like when we build systems, we always try to future-proof them as much as possible, and so we're always thinking as far into the future ahead as possible, and trying to plan for every possible outcome. And then you do that, and you have to sometimes start over anyway. But yeah, we've been pretty lucky where I think a lot of the systems in place have been future proofed pretty well, and looked back and be like, wow, I got it. We did that earlier because that really helped us out now. The only things that I think kind of big change that might be coming in or relating around the mix and dynamics. Um, we're going to try to improve that a little bit, but other than that, it's pretty solid.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is just player foley is something that we've always kind of wanted to keep improving on. Player movement, meaning, yeah, it's a tough thing to do because of course we've never been to space, but
Speak for yourself.
yeah, right. But yeah, that's something that we're always.
Yet.
Yes, sorry, I haven't been to space yet. Elon Musk has not returned any of my calls. I don't know why.
So here's a slightly technical question from Guardian. How much rework of Unity's sound engine was required, if any? And is there any interesting stories of how you managed to achieve the dynamic sound interactions in the game, specifically the transitions between pressurized and depressurized areas?
Well, I'll take the first part. It's a real short answer. We don't use the Unity sound engine at all. We use Audio Kinetic Wise, and that's 100% our sound engine. So we don't play around with the Unity stuff at all. I don't know if Matt or Luke want to take the second half.
Yeah, pressurization versus depressurization. Anyone want to talk about that specifically? I've not worked on that much.
Luke, you've been polishing some stuff with that lately.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of, you're hitting the nail on the head there, is a lot of it was set up by Ben at the get-go of what we wanted to hit. Obviously, we're trying to go for the kind of gravity-esque sound where you really don't hear a lot of things in depressurized space unless it's like really dangerous to the player. But I think the biggest thing we're trying to hit right now actually is the transition times going in between pressure and depressurized space. Like, I think we're pretty well there with the differentiation between, obviously, like you're in a ship, you're floating around and you hear all the electronics buzzing around you, which is working out great. But I think, we want to really hit the smoother transition times between when you go into an airlock and everything's getting depressurized or vice versa. We want that to feel more impactful because you obviously have to do it a lot. And then, of course, violent decompression is very tricky because pressure is a really, I'm sure everyone who's played the game has encountered a pressure bug at some point. Like, it is a beast, and we're always trying to improve it. And that also happens with audio. So we want to make sure that we smooth all of that out. But
I guess one thing I can add is that we try to have like a pressurized and an unpressurized version of most sounds to give it a really unique character in both. Because when you're in unpressurized, there's no sound of the space. And so you get a lot less sound design tricks and techniques. So we try to make a new version of the sound in unpressurized that still has a lot of character, tells the player what they need to know, and still hopefully sounds cool.
that's actually a really good point, Matt, is creating a really cool big explosion type sound without reverb is really tricky. So I think Matt's had to do a lot of that kind of stuff with our, our explosions, and that's why we lean so heavily on interference with your suit. Like an explosion, if you're close enough, will negatively affect your radio interference, for example.
Yeah, totally. That's something we've really lent into heavily on this game, is different flavors of interference. There's one thing I don't know if anyone will have necessarily noticed it, but all the time you're playing, there is a constant sound of interference in your suit. There's like a background ambience of your suit, just a very gentle, soft interference sound. Very, very subtle, but it's there the whole time. So when you hear these other bursts of interference from things exploding or vaporizing around you, it kind of feels like it's growing out of this existing interference sound. So it's not just coming out of the blue, and it doesn't feel surprising. It feels like it fits in the universe, because we're kind of establishing that the suit has this background interference to begin with, and then like building out of that. Yeah.
Cool. So we are pretty much out of time. There's one more question that I thought I'd ask that might be of interest to people. The real JK asks, what is the division of labor like on the audio team?
It sounds like such a Link's term. Please inform us of your division of labor. I mean, it tends to be I'm always working on voice and music, and I kind of take an overall kind of view, of a kind of holistic view, and then like Matt and Luke, you chime in with what you guys do.
Yeah, I've been mostly focusing on all the tools. I help out on environmental sounds, all the explosions, some of the interference, demo charges, AI nodes.
And yeah, I think I mean, I'm the last person on the team, so I guess anything that wasn't just talked about is something that I'm trying to do. But it seems to be pretty, even across the board. A lot of the ship systems are things that I would deal with. And of course, Matt's helped on that as well with like the power generator sound. That's really sweet. And then player movements like thrusters, pickups, and physics of items in the world.
You mean one of my favorite sounds, the helmet in the ghost ship.
The
I still
which?
the helmet in the ghost ship. I love that.
Oh
the
yeah,
beep that sonar beep it makes is so cool.
yeah, that was a
Yeah.
fun one.
That is awesome. And it's worth mentioning that like one thing we all do is we all get into the technical implementation stuff. Like it's not like any of us just make the sounds and like pass them off to programmers. We're all up to our elbows in like Unity components and deep in the guts of Wise and all the rest of it. So we're all kind of like up to our necks in crazy implementation systems.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us today, audio team. We can cut you loose. Tina and I will hang out for a bit and answer any sort of generic questions or any questions that don't require specific audio knowledge. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for coming along and hanging out. It's been really fun. I really wish we had a bit more time. So many great questions. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Sorry, I thought we had an hour, so I'm sorry if I went a little long in the tooth there, but
That's
that
okay.
was
it's
really
fine.
fun.
We can come back and do more over time.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.